Okay, so I'm gonna pull you back. So if we could have each table kind of report out their most important point for the group. Since I think I warned, if we could have, once we're all ready, sorry. No, that's okay. If we could have this group kind of go first, I think I warned you first, so if you guys could share.
Would you like us to share from the entire discussion or something that's not like an aha moment?
Yeah.
Okay. I think speaking from where.
Okay, hold on. I want to make sure everybody hears. So we're ready to report out. Groups on the side who are very engaged. Nope, no worries. No worries. Your boss in the back just kind of keeps looking at his clock, and I just want to make sure I honor the time. So if we're going to just kind of report out. So if you guys can go ahead.
One of the pieces that we felt was that she became a great facilitator of inquiry, and that she continued to press questions and asking probing questions, getting them to do some accountable talk with one another, back and forth, and then asked them to kind of report out. But it was interesting the way that, like we said, how she just continued to ask questions, those probing questions. At number 5, I think the follow-up piece that was the part that I studied, but saw a lot of that.
Yeah, for sure. So that day was actually pretty monumental for us because that question that Ryan asked is a huge mathematical idea. You could ask high school students why a -1 and a 1 both have 1, like what that 1 means, and they would not be able to articulate. And the fact that she asked that question, it's amazing for a 4th or 5th grader to ask that question, because that's like the baseline for understanding absolute value, which is what they'll study in middle and high school. So when she asked that question, it was just huge. Before we move on, are there any questions or wonderings that you have in particular about the kids or anything about the video itself before I move on? Because I didn't really set up anything like that for you. Pretty sure they're either 4th going into 5th or 5th going into 6th. I can't remember. So that's a great question. So how did they get chosen? They were supposed to be chosen purely by random after you decided who were your kids that are struggling in mathematics. The first year, the districts wanted to send all of their really smart kids so that they made sure to look good for all the people around the world that were coming to watch. But this being the 3rd year, then we really worked with districts. No, she wants to work with kids who struggle in mathematics. And then, because it's a part of a research study, it was a randomized drawing. So you had general ed, special ed, and advanced kids, actually all, because some people still snuck in, but all within that group. So it does actually represent pretty close to a true classroom. Anything else? In fact, the young kid, Kevin, at the end, who answered the question about the positive and the negative, really not answering her question at all, he had some significant learning disabilities when you actually saw Kevin's work. Because these kids had little composition books that they kept all their work in every day. And so then after the kids left, they had to leave them there so we could walk around and see their work. And he had, in my estimation, the handwriting of a 1st grader. And she has them write a lot in their books, and so it was always very hard to read his work and what he was doing. Okay, no other questions about the video? All right.
I was wondering if the kids are always mic'd, or was it special for this video?
For the whole week that they're there, they are mic'd. Mm-hmm. Yep. And part of that was for the purposes of their research, but part of it was only a certain number of people could actually fit in the room to watch them. So there were another 20 people that were in an auxiliary room that were watching it on a screen, and then the only way that they could hear was through the mics. So they had actually a little bit of a different experience than those of us that were in the room, because we always couldn't hear the kid-to-kid conversations because it wasn't mic'd in the room. It was mic'd to the cameras. But when you were in the auxiliary room, then you could actually hear the kid-to-kid conversations, good or bad. You could hear what they were saying to each other quietly, because those are pretty sensitive mics. So it led to great conversations about student engagement, actually. It was very good. It was very good. Okay, so your most important point from your conversations that you guys had at your table.
We talked about how the teacher responses looked to the student responses, and the fact that it's not teacher-student, but she would reiterate to the class what a student said, but she wouldn't necessarily make it seem like a yes or no answer, and then she would move on to the next one until she finally realized she wasn't getting what she wanted, and then she did a short little mini lesson of 1 and -1 the same distance away from 0, and then more student. And I think Kevin was the one who, at the end, he put his head down for about 10 seconds after he responded. And when he started answering, we noticed that she cut him off and actually stopped him short and then allowed him to finish. And we feel like that affected the rest of his answer and how he behaved after that. So maybe, so our aha moment was we might not think about how even our nonverbals of how we're holding ourselves and as students are responding to us and our engagement with them, we know if it's an answer we're not necessarily looking for, we might not be excited about that.
Yeah.
And that affects that student.
Yeah. The kids can read that in
Right.
you. Yes.
And
yeah,
so we
for sure.
simply need to, I hear what you're saying and reiterate what they're saying, go on to the next one instead of looking for the yes or the no of what's yes or no in our mind.
Yeah. What, do you remember the phrase that she kept using as kids were responding? Because I just attended to it because she said it more than once.
She said okay a lot.
She said okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Can you add on to what so-and-so just said? Can anyone add on to, is there another important idea around what so-and-so said? Someone in this group mentioned, now I can't remember, maybe it was you earlier today, that sometimes when we give you the correct answer, we confirm yes or no that that's what we want to hear, that stops the thinking in the room. And by responding with statements like, can anyone add to? Is there another important idea that someone might have around that adds to? That continues them thinking. Now for her, she was probably stalling because she was looking for someone to stay the distance between 0 and 1, and 0 and -1 is the same. But that, again, that still is keeping the thinking going and not shutting it down maybe in the way that her nonverbals communicated to Kevin. Yeah. Great, thank you. In the back, your most important point?
Kind of what we were just talking about, but we were noticing that the way she asked questions included everybody. So when she said, can anyone add on to that? Or when she asked, does anyone have any more ideas about that or their thinking? It was open-ended enough that a lot of kids were able to share.
Yeah. Yeah. Very like a inclusive kind of way that anyone can throw an idea. Didn't appear that she was looking for the correct answer, even though she probably was internally. So anyone can kind of toss something out, and it's valued. Good. You guys?
A lot of ours has been covered, but one thing we really appreciated was just how authentic it was. That you could tell, when she threw out the question and no one answered, we felt like the wait time was quick. But as a teacher, it always feels like eternity. And so you saw her go from like not getting all those responses that she wanted them all to share to go into a turn and share with your table partner. And that is real life for teachers. You do have the kid that's tired and so it was, I liked that it wasn't a perfect lesson. I liked that all the answers weren't so right on. So I thought we appreciated just
That's
seeing
great.
that.
Great. So she had crickets, right? She asked that question at the end. Can someone take Ryan's question and talk about 4 and -4? And okay, so if you could turn and talk to someone. And when she came back, then I know you couldn't see the whole room, but at least along that one side, there were 3 people that had, we didn't watch the complete end of it, but there were 3 people that had their hands up. So whether that was indicative of the whole room, at least there were less crickets in the room by giving them some time to talk, right? Because if you have your head down, then everybody loves the chance to talk to the person next to them, whether they like that person or not. So then your head picks up and you talk, at least, to the person sitting next to you. Great, thank you. And then you guys?
Well, ours, number 4, was about avoiding judgments in students' responses, and we noticed that she avoided saying good or great if they were right. Makes the others think, well, their thoughts weren't so good or great if they were different. But we noticed her saying thank you a lot and showing appreciation for their thinking and not verifying if they were right or wrong, but telling them that was interesting, thank you.
Yep. Did you notice when she did say that something was good or great? The question. She said, Ryan, thank you. That is a great question. I really appreciate that question. She said it a couple times at the beginning, and then she said it again at the end, that what she honored was the question that the girl had, not the responses that she was getting from the kids. So that might have been confusing, because if you were honing in on that word, she did use it, but it was more so in in response to the question that the girl asked, which was another interesting point that we talked about. Couple of the groups put that up, that the students start to ask questions themselves. So this whole part of her mini lesson started with a student asking a really great question, not necessarily her. Now, she followed up with great questions, but it was the student generating a great question. The other piece, and because I'm the math nerd in the room, this is stuff that I noticed, but what she was hearing as the teacher in some of the student responses were some of the misconceptions that kids have around positive and negative numbers. If you were listening to the kids and when she was asking the question, when they would talk about the negative number, they always talked about, well, it takes away. So they viewed at this point in their career with learning about integers that they viewed negative numbers as a subtraction, like it's always a subtraction, but they don't know from what. But it's kind of it's a huge misconception that kids have, that she was unable to kind of process in the back of her head, that and she changed her language when she talked about it, and she said, she let a couple kids say it, and then she said, yes, a negative is taken away from 0, which was why it is negative. So she was kind of clearing it up that it's not always subtraction. Negative doesn't always indicate subtraction. So Jen, I think I talked about how questions can kind of elicit student misconceptions, and that's what happened as the kids were talking about why they thought or what ideas they had around the differences between 1 and -1. I'm going to keep you guys here for a little bit, and because we're going to get back to the bad chart in a second. So in these groups, we're going to kind of brainstorm some ideas. But just to kind of bring this back up, this was a chart that Mark had and Jen referred to around, the qualities of essential questions. And that lesson started with an open-ended question that was generated by a student. And if we went through 1 through 7, we may not necessarily be able to say that all 7 of those things happen within that little snippet of the video. But I think we could say that many of them did. And so they were supposed to be doing, 4th or 5th grade work, but this idea of the important transferable ideas and knowing that, understanding the placement of positive and negative number lines and how it relates to absolute value, that is definitely an idea that's going to transfer to their later learning in mathematics. And I'm the math girl, right? So of course I'm going to talk about math, but one of the chapters that is in the book talks about implementation challenges. And one of the challenges that they talk about in the book is that math is a challenge, meaning it's sometimes very difficult to come up with some great essential questions around the area of mathematics. And so it's not just because I'm a math nerd that I'm the one talking about this, it's because it is one of the challenges. We've had great examples already around science, we've had great examples already for English, but what does this look like, or what could this look like in mathematics? And I'm not saying that I have all of those answers for you, but certainly some ideas. This is an example of a Smarter Balanced Assessment item, and it's a 3rd grade math question. So I'm not sure if you can see it all the way in the back, so I'm just going to read it through real quickly. Nikki has 4 packs of pencils. Each pack contains 15 pencils. In each pack, 5 pencils are blue, and the rest are green. Create a bar graph to show how many of each color pencil Nikki has. Click on the graph to show where the top of the bar should go. So we've seen these kind of questions, and do I have any 3rd grade teachers in here? Okay, so for me, I don't know a ton about third grade, but I think that this would be a pretty horrific question for a third grader to ask and to answer. So you have some beginning of multiplication in there, perhaps, but then you also have addition and subtraction. It's kind of multi-step that the kids are going to have to go through to find the answer to this problem, and then to put it on a graph. So right, you're finding an answer, then you're putting it on the graph. We've seen these. We've seen all the big, ugly, scary problems from Smarter Balanced. And so I won't spend a ton of time on that because I think we can build essential questions around this with less problem than we can in some of the other areas. However, when we look at how our standards are structured for math, there are some ideas in there that actually could help with, especially with this idea of a big idea that transfers across grades, if we kind of know where to look in the standards. So I put this up here, and I didn't hit copy 1,000 times just to see if you were paying attention. These are cluster headings that are above the standards. They're the part of the standards that we don't always attend to because we're just looking at, I just need to know what it is that I'm responsible for teaching in my grade. But above those standards, there are what they call in math these cluster headings. And so you can see this idea of place value and how it moves from first to second to third to fourth to fifth. And why this is important, and the fact that it's written the exact same way, is you can write a pretty great essential question that not only transfers and you go back to often within your grade, but you could say, how does place value understanding help me know how to answer my math questions, whether I'm doing adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. How this represents a game changer is, do you see this little footnote right here at third grade? So in third and fourth grade, actually it's in fourth grade, but in third grade is the grade that they're supposed to start using algorithms. And in my world, algorithms are what shuts down big ideas, or big essential questions. Because we put that abstract right in front of kids, and that really gets us directly to this very detailed, very focused place in mathematics, instead of the more open and inclusive type conversations that we can have around strategies to solve problems. If we move right to that algorithm, we get very closed very quickly, which is where we're at now, which is why it's hard to write essential questions in math, because we only focus in on those skills. The way that this particular standard reads is it's only in fourth grade that students, the standard actually reads, students will be able to fluently use the algorithm to do multi-digit addition and subtraction. If I were to guess, though, kids are being asked to use that algorithm probably starting in second grade because of a lack of understanding about what these standards are telling us around the big ideas in math. So without belaboring this too much, I would think about when I'm going back into my math classroom and what kinds of questions that I would ask. Read those standards carefully because there are opportunities to write essential questions in a way that actually is a more inclusive way and allowing kids to deeply understand mathematics and understanding these ideas of place value and how place value transfers across 6 grades in their work with just understanding number in general and then how to do operations with that number. And so the standards previous were not really written in that way. And the assessment, this is another third grade question, will actually follow that. So notice that these numbers are not lined up, not indicating to this third grader that they have to use an algorithm to do this, where they cross off numbers and put little baby numbers and then remember where the one goes and what it means every time. All they really want the kids to do is to subtract those numbers. And so if a kid can use place value understanding to make the exchanges in the places where they need to make exchanges, then they should be allowed to do that. Now, in fourth grade, will those numbers be lined up and will there be kind of an expectation that they will have to use that procedure very efficiently and effectively? Certainly. But that's only after 5 years of working on strategies and building an understanding of place value. So that's just kind of my little spiel about math is hard because we're kind of in this place of understanding this is what math has looked like for us in the past, and it's going to look different moving forward, and we need to kind of allow for that. There's this quote in the book that I think is pretty powerful, and I think that this group over there kind of hit the nail on the head, is that we all want our classrooms to be this place where we have great dialogue and kids are diving in and they're debating each other and they're, creating an argument and providing evidence. But sometimes we accidentally pose questions that elicit a yes or no, that we really want to just move on to the next thing, and so we're looking for that right answer, or we know which kid to go to when we need that right answer so that we can move on. And so the whole cusp of your day today, or the whole big idea for your day today, has been how do we utilize essential questions and classroom dialogues to kind of change the rules in our classrooms. But changing them can be kind of uncomfortable, right? So there's this cute anecdote. Here's the quote in the book, but there's this anecdote that I'm going to read for you. And I'm going to try my best to pretend like I'm an actress, and I'm not, so just kind of bear with me. So you're actually brave enough to try one class of teaching by inquiry. You prepare for the big day. You have a problem ready to start the class. That problem, you pose that problem, you wait for an answer. 3 seconds later, you begin to panic. Your hands sweat. The class just stares at you dumbly. Calm down. Students need more time to think. They need time to digest the very notion that you actually want them to think. They need time to figure out what the question meant and also whether they dare stick their necks out in a response. Wait. Smile. Don't you dare glance at your wristwatch. Stare expectantly at 1 or 2 students that you normally count on to be ready. Don't nudge them a little bit with your smile. Wait. Don't say a word. Smile expectantly. Wait. In 2 or 3 hours, someone will offer a tentative response. Should you be able to sneak a glance at the time, you will find that those 2 hours were really 40 seconds. Glory be, the student who speaks up gives the correct response, right out of the text. In sheer gratitude, you want to shout, "Good for you! That's right, I knew I could count on you." Don't you dare. Don't you dare tell that student that the answer is right. Don't you dare deny the class the fun of thinking, deciding, and judging. Instead, you turn, lay that delight on some other student. Do you agree with that? Shock. Many students have never been asked that before. The students will survive. You will live through it. With a bit of patience and practice, both you and the students will learn to discuss an issue, to question an assumption, to define a word, to explore alternatives, to gain the skills students need for thinking. Since you already know how to do this, your job is simply to learn to be quiet. I thought that was a great little anecdote that was in this book that I wanted to be able to share with you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of branch into the other part of our chart. We're going to take a look at, okay, so let's say someone comes into your classroom and you kind of are getting the feedback, whether it's verbal or nonverbal feedback, that things are not going well in your classroom. What I would like you to do is to kind of brainstorm some ideas. Take a look at the chart that's closest to the table that you're sitting at, whether it was your chart or not, about let's pretend these are the things that you see when you go into your classroom. What suggestions would you want to hear or would you want to give if this is what you saw in a classroom to help that teacher grow in becoming better at these questioning strategies? So to kind of help you with that, there's 2 other resources. You have the handout in front of you with some of your own ideas that you took, the conversations that you had. There's an additional sheet in there that's pretty valuable, and it's the handout 5. It talks about planning for effective questionings. Mark gave you a text set, so I feel obligated to do the same. So the other piece to have you look at is in the Essential Questions book on pages 70 to 74. They have this kind of chart that goes through, this is what it could look and sound like for kids when things are going wrong, and here are some suggestions that you might want to think about. So as the groups where you're at, if you could take the bad chart off wherever it's hanging and kind of brainstorm some ideas of feedback that you would want to give. Either you would want to give a teacher or you would want to hear as a teacher if you felt like this was something that was happening in your classroom. And then we're going to kind of report out some of those ideas.